You've been up since 3 a.m. cutting potatoes while shells explode nearby, and a man's life depends on whether you can heat his meal to exactly 165 degrees in a trench using gasoline and a helmet. Welcome to being a field cook in World War II. If you use these to fall asleep, hit subscribe so you don't miss any. Comment where you're at and the time too. Kind of fun seeing all the different places. Someone from Iceland commented once, and I had to Google what time zone that even is. Okay, tonight it's World War II field cooking, but before we go anywhere, get cozy, like actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect, trust me on this one. Your eyes crack open to darkness, only the faintest hint of dawn visible through the canvas tent. It's 1943, and you're in an Allied camp somewhere in Europe. The rough wool blanket scratches against your skin as you shift. Your back aches from sleeping on what's basically a glorified burlap sack stuffed with straw. But you don't have time to complain about comfort. The sudden blast of a whistle jolts you fully awake. 4 in the goddamn morning. Again. You'd think being a cook would get you better hours than the infantry, but no. In the field, cooks are up first, to bed last. Rise and shine, cookie, the mess sergeant's voice booms through the tent. 200 hungry boys need breakfast in 2 hours. Your head still foggy with sleep, you roll off your cot and pull on your uniform. The fabric is stiff with yesterday's grease and sweat. Unlike your bed at home, where you might linger for a few more minutes of warmth, here there's no choice. You're already behind schedule. Move your arse, private. Those potatoes won't peel themselves. The moment your boots hit the muddy ground outside, the cold slaps you in the face. It's early spring, and the night chill hasn't burned off yet. Your breath forms clouds in front of you as you trudge toward the field kitchen. The Gulashkanona goulash cannon, as everyone calls it, looms in the pre-dawn gloom. It's a massive field kitchen on wheels, with its tall chimney sticking up like the barrel of artillery, hence the nickname. The Germans invented it, but every army has their version now. This mobile kitchen is your domain, your weapon in the war. As you approach, you can see the mess sergeant already has the fires going. Smoke billows from the chimney, and the smell of burning wood mixes with the damp morning air. What you wouldn't give for a cup of coffee right now, but you know the rule: cooks eat last. Get on those potatoes, rookie, the sergeant barks, pointing to several massive burlap sacks. 200 pounds. I want 'em peeled and diced in 45 minutes. 200 pounds. Your shoulders slump. You grab a small paring knife the army never gives cooks proper equipment and drag the first sack over. Plunging your hands into the cold, dirt-covered potatoes, you get to work. You think that's bad? The sergeant laughs, noticing your expression. Back in North Africa, we had to peel potatoes with our bayonets while standing in a sandstorm. Sand got everywhere. Boys were crunching their way through breakfast for days. You're pretty sure he's exaggerating, but you don't dare say so. Instead, you focus on finding a rhythm. Grab potato, scrape, turn, scrape, slice, toss into the water bucket. Repeat. Your hands quickly grow numb from the cold water. Hey, you know why they made me a cook? Asks a skinny private working beside you. Without waiting for an answer, he continues, I told him I worked at my uncle's restaurant back home. Total lie. I just didn't want to be in the infantry. Now I'm wondering if maybe getting shot at would be better than this. You snort. At least we get to sleep indoors most nights. Yeah. But we still die, he says, suddenly serious. Remember Thompson? His field kitchen took a direct hit last month. They found his ladle before they found his body. A shiver runs down your spine that has nothing to do with the morning chill. Despite being technically non-combat personnel, field cooks aren't exactly safe. The massive smoking kitchens make perfect targets. The enemy knows that destroying food hurts morale faster than anything. Less talking, more peeling, the sergeant shouts. By the time you finish the potatoes, your fingers are cut in a dozen places, stinging from potato juice and bleeding into the water, but there's no time to bandage them. Next come the onions, 50 pounds of them. Your eyes burn and water as you chop, the knife now slippery with a mixture of onion juice and your own blood. "Welcome to war, kid," mutters an older cook as he passes by. "The only difference between us and the infantry is they know who's trying to kill them." The sun is barely up when the sergeant orders you to start the porridge. Massive cauldrons hang over wood fires and you pour in oats, water, salt and a small amount of precious sugar. The heat from the fires is welcome against the morning chill, but it's also oppressive. Sweat begins to soak through your uniform, mixing with the grease and food stains already there. Stir constantly, the sergeant instructs. If it burns, you'll be eating it alone for a week. The wooden paddle you use to stir is 6 feet long and weighs about 10 pounds. After 15 minutes, your shoulders burn with the effort. The porridge bubbles and thickens, occasionally splashing up to scald your hands and arms. You've learned to ignore minor burns. They're just part of the job. "Oh shit," says another cook suddenly, peering into one of the supply crates. "The bacon's gone off." The sergeant rushes over, his face darkening as he inspects the meat. In the dim light of early morning, you can see the greenish tint and smell the rot. Maggots writhe in the fatty parts. "How bad is it?" he asks. "About half is still okay. The rest," the cook makes a gagging sound. "Salvage what you can," the sergeant orders. "Cut off the bad parts. The men need protein." Your stomach turns at the thought, but you know he's right. In the field, you waste nothing. Food supplies are too precious, too hard to come by, so you watch as two cooks carefully trim away the rotted portions of bacon, saving every edible scrap. "What do we do about the smell?" one of them asks. "Extra pepper," the sergeant answers without hesitation, "and don't tell anyone." This is the reality of being a field cook in wartime. You make do, you improvise, you feed men with whatever you have available, because a hungry soldier is an ineffective soldier. By 5:30 a.m, preparations are in full swing. The smell of cooking food begins to permeate the camp. In the distance, you can hear the stirring of men in their tents, the sound of boots on ground, the occasional cough or laugh. "They're like animals," says the skinny private, nodding toward the sounds. "They can smell food from a mile away. That's because they're starving half the time," you reply. You try marching 20 miles a day on K rations. K rations, the portable, individual meal packages given to soldiers in the field, are notoriously awful. They're meant for emergency use, but the realities of war mean many men subsist on them for days or even weeks. A hot meal from a field kitchen is more than sustenance. It's a luxury, a reminder of home, a morale booster. The bacon situation is under control, but now there's another problem. The coffee grinder has jammed again. Without coffee, you might as well serve the men empty plates. Nothing causes mutiny faster than no morning coffee. "Fix it," the sergeant orders, thrusting the grinder into your hands. "Use whatever you need, just get it working." You examine the grinder, finding a small stone that's gotten mixed in with the beans. After removing it, you take the mechanism apart, clean it as best you can with your filthy rag, and reassemble it. It's still not working perfectly, but it'll do the job. "Not bad," the sergeant admits, testing the repaired grinder. "You've got good hands." It's the closest thing to a compliment you've received since joining the kitchen crew. You try not to look too pleased. As 6 a.m. approaches, the pace becomes frantic. Porridge needs to be ladled into serving trays. Bacon, what's left of it, needs to be fried. Coffee needs to be brewed, gallons and gallons of it. Bread that was baked yesterday needs to be sliced. Every available surface in the kitchen area is covered with food, or preparation materials. "They're coming," someone shouts, and you look up to see the first wave of soldiers approaching, mess kits in hand, breath visible in the cold morning air. "Places, everyone," the sergeant calls out. "Remember, keep the line moving. No seconds until everyone's had firsts." You take your position behind a massive pot of porridge, ladle in hand. The soldiers file past, holding out their mess kits, their faces tired but expectant. You scoop, pour, in a rhythm that quickly becomes mechanical. "Put some muscle into it," the sergeant says, passing behind you. "These boys need calories. Don't be stingy." So you add a little extra to each serving, knowing it means less for someone at the end of the line. It's an impossible moral calculation, but you make it 100 times every meal. "Thanks, Cookie," a mud-splattered corporal says as you fill his mess kit. "Smells good today." You nod, not breaking your rhythm. Another soldier approaches, this one with a bandaged hand. "Can you help me, buddy?" he asks, gesturing to his injury. "Can't hold the tray steady." Without hesitation, you take his mess kit, fill it carefully, and hand it back in a way he can grasp with his good hand. He nods gratefully and moves on. The line seems endless. 200 men, each hungry, each looking to you for their daily sustenance. Some make small talk. Others are silent, their minds already on the day's missions or the previous day's horrors. A few complain about the food, but most are just grateful to have a hot meal. "Hey, is that bacon supposed to be that colour?" a sergeant asks, suspiciously, poking at his meat. "That's just the smoke," you lie smoothly. "Special smoking technique from back home." He doesn't look convinced, but moves on anyway. Hunger is a powerful motivator. By the time the last soldier has been served, your arms ache, your back throbs, and you're starving. But there's no rest yet. The cauldrons need to be cleaned, the serving area tidied, and preparations for lunch must begin immediately. "Take 15 minutes to eat," the sergeant tells the kitchen crew. "Then we start on lunch." You fill your own mess kit with what's left porridge scraped from the bottom of the pot, a few scraps of bacon, and coffee that's been sitting so long it's developed a skin. Still, it's hot food, and you wolf it down standing up, too tired to even find a place to sit. "Not bad for your first big breakfast service," the skinny private says, eating beside you. "You didn't drop anything, puke, or get yelled at too much. That's a win in my book." You manage a tired smile. "Thanks. Is it always this intense?" "Nah," he replies, then grins. "Sometimes it's worse. Wait until we have to pack up and move the kitchen on 10 minutes notice, or cook during an air raid, or my personal favourite, when supply lines get cut, and the sergeant tells us to get creative with what we feed the men." Your heart sinks at the thought, but before you can respond, the sergeant's voice cuts through your conversation. "Break's over, start peeling those carrots for lunch. We're making stew." And just like that, you're back at it. Your hands find the knife again, your eyes blur with fatigue, but you keep going. Because in war, the fighting never really stops, and neither does hunger. As you work, you think about the men you just fed. In a few hours, some of them might be dead, but for a brief moment this morning, you gave them comfort, a hot meal, a taste of normality in the insanity of war. It's not much in the grand scheme of things, but today, it's your contribution to the war effort. The goulash cannone fires roar as you prepare for the next meal. 200 men, 3 meals a day. Day after day after day until the war ends or you do. This is your battlefield now. And it's only 7 a.m. Your day as a field cook has just begun. The kitchen operates like a machine, with every cook serving a specific function. You quickly learn that efficiency isn't just about speed, it's about survival. The faster you prepare the food, the less time you're exposed and vulnerable. The more organised you are, the less fuel you waste. In war, even cooking becomes a tactical operation. Always keep your head down, the sergeant instructs as you prepare lunch stew, and listen for incoming. You'll hear the whistle before the explosion. As if on cue, a distant rumbling shakes the ground. Artillery, but too far away to be a concern. Still, several of the newer cooks duck instinctively. You'll get used to it, an older cook tells you. After a while, you can tell how close they are just from the sound. When you need to worry is when you hear them but don't have time to be scared before they hit. With the lunch stew simmering, the sergeant calls you over to a separate section of the field kitchen. Here, several large metal boxes sit on the ground, each about the size of a small footlocker. "These," he says, patting one of the boxes, "are your new best friends, Mermite containers. We use them to transport hot food to positions too dangerous or remote for the men to come to us." He opens one to show you the design. Inside are several compartments separated by insulated walls. You can put hot stew in one section, bread in another, dessert in the third. Keeps everything at temperature for hours. When the fighting is too heavy for the men to break for meals, we send these out instead. Who delivers them, you ask, already suspecting the answer. "We do," he replies, confirming your fear. "Usually the newest cook gets the honour. Hope you remember your basic training, because delivering these will take you right up to the front lines." Your mouth goes dry at the thought. When you volunteered for kitchen duty, you'd hope to stay away from the worst of the fighting. Now you realise that might have been naive. "Don't look so worried," the sergeant says, actually showing a hint of compassion. "They usually don't target a single man running food, usually." That afternoon, you get your first taste of Mermite duty. The stew is ladled into the containers, bread is wrapped and placed in its compartment, and coffee is poured into insulated pots. Then the sergeant hands you a map with an X marked on it. "Second Platoon, B Company," he says. "They're dug in about a mile east of here. Follow this path, keep your head down and don't spill the food. Those boys haven't had a hot meal in 3 days. The containers are heavier than they look, especially when filled with food. You struggle to lift 2 of them, one in each hand. Take this too," says the skinny private, handing you a rifle. "Just in case." "In case of what?" you ask, not sure how you'll carry it along with the food. "In case you want to shoot yourself rather than come back for another shift in this kitchen," he jokes, but then turns serious. "Strap it to your back. You probably won't need it, but you don't want to be caught without it." With the mermites weighing down your arms and the rifle awkward on your back, you set off. The well-worn path leads through a wooded area, offering some cover. As you walk, the sounds of the camp fade behind you, replaced by an eerie quiet occasionally broken by distant gunfire. Your heart races. With each step, every shadow could be an enemy soldier. Every sound could be a sniper taking aim. The weight of the containers makes your progress slow, and your arms begin to tremble with the effort. After what feels like hours, but is probably only 20 minutes, you hear voices ahead, American voices. Relief washes over you as you approach a series of foxholes and makeshift barriers where soldiers are positioned. "Food's here," someone calls out when they spot you, and suddenly you're surrounded by grateful men. "About damn time," says a lieutenant, but there's no real anger in his voice. "What have you got for us, Cookie?" "Beef stew," you reply, setting down the containers with shaking arms. "And bread, coffee too." "Real beef?" asks a private skeptically. You think about the tough, stringy meat you helped prepare that morning, officially labelled as beef but of highly questionable origin. "Army beef," you answer diplomatically. They laugh, understanding perfectly what that means. As they open the containers and the smell of hot food wafts out, you see the change in their faces. Exhaustion gives way to pleasure, if only momentarily. Some close their eyes as they take their first bite, savouring the simple comfort of a warm meal. You don't know what this means, buddy, a sergeant tells you as he collects portions for the men who can't leave their positions. We've been eating cold K rations since Tuesday. You watch as they eat, struck by how something so basic food you might have complained about in civilian life can bring such joy in these circumstances. Despite the danger of your delivery mission, despite your exhaustion, you feel a strange sense of pride. Better get back before it gets dark, the lieutenant advises, handing you the empty containers. And thanks, really. The walk back is just as tense, but faster without the weight of the food. When you arrive at the field kitchen, the sergeant merely nods, which you've learned is his version of high praise. Good job not dying, the skinny private says cheerfully. Now help me with dinner prep. We're trying to make something edible out of powdered eggs and canned ham. And so your day continues. Prep, cook, serve, clean, repeat. By evening, you've been on your feet for over 14 hours. Every muscle aches. Your hands are a mess of cuts, burns, and blisters. Your uniform is stiff with sweat and food residue. Dinner service is similar to breakfast, though the men are even more tired now, their faces grimmer with the day's experiences. You serve mechanically, too exhausted to even register their faces anymore. After the last man is fed, after the last pot is cleaned, the sergeant finally releases you for the night. It's past 9 p.m. Get some sleep, he says. We start again at 400. You drag yourself back to your tent, barely able to keep your eyes open. Your cot, which seems so uncomfortable this morning, now looks like the most inviting bed in the world. You don't even bother to remove your boots, just collapse onto the rough blanket. As you drift off to sleep, images from the day flash through your mind. The mountains of potatoes, the rotting bacon, the grateful faces of the men at the front line. In your last moments of consciousness, a strange thought occurs to you. Perhaps being a field cook isn't so different from being a combat soldier after all. Your weapons might be ladles instead of rifles. Your battles fought against time and scarcity rather than enemy soldiers, but the stakes feel just as high. A man's survival might not depend on how well you can shoot, but it absolutely depends on whether you can feed him. Tomorrow will bring another day of the same challenges, another day of improvising, of making do, of turning meagre supplies into meals that keep an army going. Another day of burns and cuts and back-breaking labour. Another day of wondering if this is the time your kitchen will be targeted. But as you finally succumb to sleep, there's a small, surprising sense of purpose settling in your chest. In a world torn apart by violence, you're creating something instead of destroying, feeding instead of killing. It's not the glory you might have imagined when the war began, but it's something real, something necessary. Your last thought before sleep claims you completely. Maybe this is exactly where you're meant to be. Unlike your cozy bed right now, where you're safe and warm, where no sergeant will wake you at 4 a.m. to peel potatoes, where no one's life depends on your cooking skills, as you sink deeper into your own comfortable pillows, imagine how precious sleep must have been to those field cooks, knowing another punishing day awaited them just a few hours away. The sergeant's boot connects with your cot at exactly 0400, right on schedule. Rise and shine, cupcake, we've got a special visitor today. You pry your eyes open, body still aching from yesterday. The tent is pitch black, the only light coming from the sergeant's flashlight as he moves on to wake the next victim. Who's coming, you mumble, already pulling on your boots. Colonel Bryant, Division Quartermaster. The skinny private from yesterday, whose name you've learned is Miller Whispers from the darkness. Big shot from HQ. Sergeant's been losing his mind about it since midnight when the message came through. Shit. No wonder the sergeant seems even more on edge than usual. Outside, the pre-dawn air bites at your face. April in Europe means the nights are still freezing, though the days sometimes hint at warmth. The field kitchen is already alive with activity, fires roaring in the Gulash Kanona. Listen up. The sergeant gathers the kitchen crew. His face looks haggard in the firelight, like he hasn't slept at all. The quartermaster is inspecting our operation today. That means everything needs to be perfect. And I mean actually perfect, not army perfect. He paces as he speaks, his anxiety infecting the group. He's bringing our new ration allocation. Word is supplies are getting tighter. The push into Germany is stretching the supply lines thin, and the brass are cutting rations across the board. A collective groan rises from the crew. Cut the belly aching, the sergeant snaps. We've got work to do. Today's menu is supposed to be powdered eggs, bacon, and toast for breakfast, beef stew and biscuits for lunch, meatloaf and potatoes for dinner. With what supplies? Asks an older cook named Jenkins. We're already scraping bottom on everything but potatoes. That's why the quartermaster is coming, genius. The sergeant rubs his temples. But he's not showing up till 0900, so we've got 5 hours to make this place inspection ready and somehow serve breakfast with what we've got. He turns to you suddenly. You. Take inventory. I want to know exactly what we have to work with. You head to the supply tent, flashlight in hand. The canvas structure holds what remains of your food stores, and it's not encouraging. Half-empty sacks of flour, a small amount of powdered eggs, coffee thank God, some tins of mysterious meat products, dehydrated vegetables, a few precious onions, lard, salt, pepper, a dwindling supply of sugar. You write everything down meticulously, painfully aware that it's not enough to make what's on the menu, not even close. When you return with the inventory list, the sergeant studies it with a deepening frown. Okay, he says finally, here's what we're going to do. Stretch the powdered eggs with extra water and a bit of flour to bulk them up. We'll fry up what's left of the bacon. But cut it smaller, thin strips. More pieces, less actual bacon per man. The toast, we've got bread from yesterday. Slice it thin, toast it hard. It'll be like eating cardboard, Miller comments. You got a better idea, the sergeant challenges. When Miller falls silent, he continues, I didn't think so. Now get moving. Breakfast at 600 sharp. The kitchen crew springs into action. You're assigned to the eggs, which turns out to be an education in creative cooking. The powdered eggs, when mixed just with water, make a pale, runny approximation of scrambled eggs. But by adding flour, a tiny bit of powdered milk, and beating the mixture vigorously, it takes on a more substantial texture. Add a pinch of this, Jenkins says, handing you a small packet of yellow powder. What is it? You ask, suspicious. Turmeric makes the eggs look more like eggs instead of library paste, he winks. Been carrying my own little stash since North Africa. The things you learn in desperate times. You sprinkle in the turmeric, amazed as the pale mixture takes on a more appetizing golden hue. Where'd you learn this trick? My grandmother, Jenkins says, already moving on to his next task. She lived through the Depression, said hunger makes you creative. As you cook the egg mixture in massive pans over the fires, you watch the other preparations. Miller is slicing bacon with surgical precision, creating pieces so thin they're almost transparent. 2 other cooks are working on the toast, cutting yesterday's loaves into slices barely thicker than paper, then browning them over the fire. They're burning the toast on purpose, Miller tells you when he notices your puzzled expression. Charred toast tastes better than stale bread, plus the black hides the spots of mould. Your stomach turns at this information, but you keep cooking. In war, food safety becomes flexible. By some miracle, breakfast is ready on time. The men file through, receiving their meagre portions with varying degrees of grace. Some grumble about the small servings, others are just grateful for hot food. You notice the sergeant giving slightly larger portions to the men who look the most exhausted, the ones with 1,000-yard stares and hands that tremble slightly as they hold out their mess kits. After breakfast, the real work begins. The sergeant has you scrubbing every surface of the field kitchen until it gleams, or at least until it looks less like a grease pit and more like a place where food might be safely prepared. The quartermaster isn't just inspecting, Jenkins explains, as you work side by side, scraping burnt egg from a massive pan. He's deciding if we get priority on the supply chain or if we get the leftovers after the other units are served. That can happen, you ask? Politics, kid. Even in war, especially in war, every unit wants the best for their men. Quartermaster's job is to decide who gets what. If he likes what he sees here, we get better supplies. If not, he makes a slashing motion across his throat. The hours crawl by. By 0845, the field kitchen is as clean as it's ever going to get. The sergeant inspects every corner, barking orders for last-minute adjustments. At precisely 0900, a jeep roars into camp. Colonel Bryant is a small man with a permanent scowl and clipboard that seems attached to his hand. He barely acknowledges the sergeant's salute before launching into his inspection. "Show me your stores," he demands. The sergeant leads him to the supply tent, where your carefully organised but pathetically depleted supplies await. You and the rest of the crew hover anxiously nearby. "This is it?" The colonel's eyebrows rise. "How have you been feeding your unit?" "Creatively, sir," the sergeant responds, standing at attention. "Show me your waste logs." The sergeant produces a ledger where he records everything that's discarded. In theory, it should be a record of spoiled food or inedible scraps. In practice, it's almost blank because you literally can't afford to throw anything away. The colonel flips through it, his frown deepening. "According to this, you've had almost no waste for 3 weeks. That's impossible unless we're using everything, sir," the sergeant interrupts. "Which we are." For a moment, the colonel is silent. Then, "Show me how." What follows is a bizarre cooking demonstration. The sergeant takes the colonel through your improvised techniques, how you extend meat by adding breadcrumbs and flour, how you use every part of every vegetable, how you repurpose stale bread into croutons or breadcrumbs or toast, how you transform leftovers into new dishes rather than discarding them. And this? The colonel points to a bucket of what looks like dirty water with vegetable scraps floating in it. "Stock, sir," the sergeant explains. "We save all vegetable trimmings, bones, meat scraps, simmer them to extract flavour. Nothing gets thrown away." The colonel makes notes on his clipboard, his expression unreadable. Then he moves on to inspect the goulash cannoli and the rest of your equipment. "Your fuel usage is well below average for a unit this size," he notes, reviewing more records. Explanation? The sergeant hesitates. "We supplement with whatever we can find, sir," meaning wood from the surrounding area, sometimes coal if we can get it. We only use the issued petroleum when absolutely necessary. More notes on the clipboard. The colonel's face gives nothing away. Finally, after nearly 2 hours of inspection, the colonel addresses the entire kitchen crew. "I've visited 12 field kitchens this week," he says, his voice crisp. "Most are struggling with the supply situation. Most are sending requests for double or triple what they actually need, hoping to get enough. Most are wasting 15-20% of what they receive." He pauses, looking each of you in the eye. "This operation is different. Your efficiency metrics are exceptional. Your waste is minimal. Your improvisation is..." He seems to search for the right word. "Commendable." The sergeant stands a little straighter. "I'm authorising a special supply drop for your unit," the colonel continues. "Not because you need more than others, but because you've proven you'll make the most of it." Relief washes over the crew. The colonel hands the sergeant a packet of papers. These are your new ration cards and allocation. There's also something else in their training materials, new techniques for preservation and preparation that we've been developing. I want you to implement them and report back on their effectiveness. Yes, sir, the sergeant says, accepting the packet like it's made of gold. One more thing, the colonel adds. I'm assigning your unit to train other kitchen crews in your methods. Sergeant, select 2 of your men to create a demonstration program. Starting next week, you'll receive visitors from other units. With that, he returns to his jeep and is gone in a cloud of dust, leaving behind a stunned kitchen crew. Holy shit, Miller breathes once the colonel is out of earshot. Did we just get promoted? More like additional duties, Jenkins mutters, but he's smiling. The sergeant is already tearing into the packet, reviewing the new allocation. His eyebrows rise higher with each page. We're getting double butter rations, he announces, and canned meat. Real canned meat, not that mystery stuff. Extra coffee too. A cheer goes up from the crew, quickly hushed by the sergeant. Don't get too excited. We've still got lunch to prepare, and now we've got these new techniques to learn. He pulls out a smaller booklet from the packet. Apparently the food scientists back home have been busy. He hands the booklet to you. You seem smart enough. Study this, then teach the rest of us. The title reads, Advanced Field Preservation and Preparation Techniques, Classified. Over the next hour, as lunch preparations continue around you, you pore over the booklet. It's fascinating stuff, scientific approaches to food preservation, nutritional calculations, methods for extending shelf life, techniques for maximizing flavor with minimal ingredients. One section particularly catches your eye, emergency substitutions. It lists dozens of creative replacements for standard ingredients, coffee made from acorns, flour extended with ground tree bark, meat substitutes made from mushrooms. It's survival cooking taken to an extreme. Anything useful in there? The sergeant asks, pausing beside you. You look up. It's amazing, Sarge. Some of this stuff is like cooking magic, but some of it... What? Some of it's basically starvation cooking. Like, there's a section on how to make bread with sawdust when flour runs out. It works, but it's barely food. The sergeant's face darkens. That's why the colonel was so interested in our methods. Things must be getting worse with the supply chain than they're telling us. He takes the booklet, flips through it quickly, then hands it back. Keep this close. I have a feeling we're going to need it. The afternoon passes in a blur of activity. Lunch is served a stew made more flavourful by the stock you've been saving, stretched with extra potatoes but still satisfying. Then it's immediately on to dinner prep and implementing some of the new techniques from the booklet. You show Jenkins and Miller a method for tenderizing tough meat using a brine solution with baking soda. It breaks down the proteins, you explain, reading from the booklet, makes even the toughest cuts edible. Where do they come up with this stuff? Miller asks, watching skeptically as you prepare the brine. Scientists, you reply. Says here they've got whole laboratories back home just working on how to feed the army better. Seems like they could just send us more food instead of clever ways to make garbage edible, Miller grumbles. Jenkins cuffs him lightly on the back of the head. Use your brain, kid. If they could send more food, they would. This is about making do with what we've got. As evening approaches, you're implementing another new technique, bread fortification, by adding extra protein in the form of powdered milk and a tiny amount of ground peanuts to the dough. You can significantly increase the nutritional value without changing the taste much. It doesn't look that different, Miller notes as you knead the dough. That's the point, you say. The men get more nutrition without feeling like they're eating weird science experiments. The promised supply drop arrives just before dinner crates of provisions that are quickly unpacked and inventoried. As the sergeant predicted, it's better quality than your usual shipments. Real canned meat, butter, coffee, even a few luxury items like chocolate and canned peaches. Special occasion only, the sergeant says, locking away the chocolate. When the men really need a morale boost. Dinner preparation takes on a festive air with the new supplies. The meatloaf actually contains recognisable meat. The potatoes are mashed with real butter. There's even gravy made from actual drippings rather than just flour and water coloured with coffee. As the men file through for dinner, their reaction is immediate. Eyes widen at the sight of the improved food. Comments of appreciation flow freely. One grizzled staff sergeant actually stops to shake your hand. "Whatever you boys are doing different, keep it up," he says. "Best meal I've had since Paris." That night, as you finally collapse into your cot, exhausted but satisfied, Miller flops down beside you. "So," he says, "you think we can actually pull this off? Teaching other units our methods?" You think about the day's events, the inspection, the new techniques, the improved supplies, the satisfied faces of the men at dinner. "Yeah," you reply, "I think we can." Miller is quiet for a moment. "You know what's weird? Before the war, I hated cooking, couldn't boil water without burning it. Now look at me, practically a chef." You laugh. "War does strange things to people." "True that." Miller yawns. "See you at 400, Cookie." As you drift towards sleep, your mind turns over everything you've learned today, the science behind field cooking, the desperate creativity born of scarcity, the thin line between nutrition and starvation that you walk every day as a field cook. In civilian life, cooking was about pleasure, about taste, about choice. Here, it's about survival. Every calorie counts. Every nutrient matters. A man's fighting strength, his very life depends on what you put in his mess kit. It's a responsibility you never expected to have, but as sleep claims you, you realise it's one you're starting to take pride in. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new improvisations, new lessons in the brutal arithmetic of feeding an army on dwindling supplies. But tonight, at least, you fed them well. And in war, perhaps that's victory enough. As you drift off in your uncomfortable cot, so different from your comfortable bed right now, you wonder what new cooking challenges tomorrow will bring. But that's for tomorrow. For now, sleep claims you, dreamless and deep. A terrifying whistling sound tears through the air, getting louder by the second. Incoming! Your body reacts before your mind does, diving for the nearest foxhole. You slam into the dirt next to Jenkins as the shell hits somewhere behind the field kitchen. The ground shakes. Dirt rains down. Your ears ring with the explosion. "Son of a bitch," Jenkins mutters, peering over the edge. They hit the latrine. 3 weeks have passed since the quartermaster's visit, and everything has changed. Your unit has pushed deeper into Germany, following the front line as Allied forces press toward Berlin. The relative safety of the rear echelon is gone. Now you're cooking less than a mile from active combat. "All clear." The sergeant's voice cuts through the chaos. "Back to work. Those potatoes won't peel themselves." You climb out of the foxhole, legs shaky, and stumble back to your station. The massive pot of stew you were stirring has been knocked over by the concussion, its contents spilled across the dirt. "Well, shit," you sigh, looking at the mess. "Clean it up and start again," the sergeant orders. Already moving on to assess other damage. "We've still got 200 men to feed by noon." This is your life now. Cooking under fire. The constant tension of knowing the next shell might have your name on it. The responsibility of keeping men fed despite everything the war throws at you. The routine that seemed so grueling back at the training camp now feels like a luxury. Wake at 0400. Prepare breakfast by 0600. Clean up. Prepare lunch by 1200. Clean up. Prepare dinner by 1800. Clean up. Sleep. Repeat. Simple. Predictable. There's nothing predictable about your current situation. Schedules are disrupted by artillery barrages, sudden orders to move, or the field kitchen itself being targeted. Food supplies arrive irregularly, if at all. Water essential for cooking must be hauled from sources that aren't always close or clean. 2 more wounded last night, Miller tells you as you work together to salvage what you can of the spilled stew. Peterson and Ramirez hit during a patrol. They're setting up a field hospital about half a mile back. You nod grimly. The casualties have been increasing as the fighting intensifies. You've been assigned to deliver meals to the wounded at the field hospital every evening, an additional duty that exposes you to the brutal reality of war in ways kitchen work usually doesn't. Save whatever meat you can find, you tell Miller, scooping up chunks from the cleaner parts of the spill. We'll wash it off and reuse it. He grimaces but follows your lead. You've both learned that waste isn't an option. Not here, not now. By some miracle, you manage to prepare a new batch of stew before lunchtime. It's thinner than planned, with less meat and more root vegetables, but it's hot and filling. The men coming in shifts from the front line are too hungry to complain. "Thanks, Cookie," a mud-splattered corporal says as you ladle stew into his mess kit. His hands are trembling slightly, the subtle tremor of a man who's seen too much combat. "Smells good. Fresh this morning," you reply, giving him a slightly larger portion than regulation. He looks like he needs it. "Bullshit," he says with a tired grin. "Nothing's fresh out here except the graves." Dark humour, the kind that would shock civilians back home but keeps soldiers sane on the front. You've grown used to it. "Fine, the rat I caught in your foxhole this morning wasn't exactly fresh," you shoot back, "but I cooked it special for you." He laughs, an actual genuine laugh, and for a moment the haunted look leaves his eyes. That's another part of your job, not just filling bellies, but providing moments of normalcy, brief respites from the horror. After lunch service, the sergeant gathers the kitchen crew. His face is grim. "New orders," he announces. "We're moving the kitchen forward tonight." A collective groan rises from the group. "Can it?" he snaps. "The lines have shifted. Our boys have pushed the Germans back another mile. Command wants the kitchen closer to support the advance." "Closer to the fighting, you mean?" Jenkins mutters. The sergeant ignores him. "We move at 0100. I want everything packed and ready by midnight. We'll set up in the new location before breakfast." Moving a field kitchen is back-breaking work under the best conditions. Moving it in the middle of the night, in hostile territory, with minimal lighting to avoid attracting enemy fire, is a special kind of hell. Every component of the Gulash Kanoni must be dismantled, loaded onto trucks, transported and reassembled. The massive cauldrons, the heating elements, the chimney sections, the fuel supplies, the water tanks, not to mention all the food stores, utensils and personal equipment. "This is insane," Miller whispers as you work together to pack crates of cooking equipment. "Moving at night? We could hit a mine, or run into a German patrol, or get strafed by aircraft." "Better than moving during daylight and definitely getting spotted," you reply, though you share his concern. "I didn't sign up to be this close to the action," he continues. "I became a cook specifically to avoid getting shot at." "How's that working out for you?" you ask dryly. He gives a short, humourless laugh, about as well as your plan to avoid KP duty back home by joining the army. At midnight precisely, the sergeant inspects the packed equipment. Everything is ready. The trucks have arrived, 3 2.5-ton GMCs with canvas covers, their headlights taped to narrow slits to minimise visibility. "All listen up," the sergeant addresses the kitchen crew. "This move is necessary but dangerous. We'll be travelling in a convoy. No lights except the taped headlights. No talking, no smoking. If we're attacked, abandon the vehicles and find cover immediately. The equipment can be replaced." You can't. It's a sobering briefing. For the first time, you fully realise how exposed you'll be during the move. "One more thing," the sergeant adds. "Each of you take a weapon, rifles in the cab with you, just in case. The weight of the M1 Garand in your hands feels foreign, uncomfortable. You've had basic weapons training, of course, but you're a cook, not a combat soldier. The idea of actually using the rifle against another human being makes your stomach turn." At 100 sharp, the convoy begins to move. You're in the second truck with Miller and Jenkins. The night is overcast, no moonlight to help navigate, which is both a blessing and a curse. Harder for the enemy to spot you, but harder for your drivers to see the rutted, bomb-cratered roads. The truck lurches forward, bouncing violently over the uneven terrain. The canvas sides flap in the wind. Every few minutes the sound of distant artillery punctuates the night. Flashes on the horizon briefly illuminate the landscape in stark, unnatural light. "Like driving through hell," Jenkins mutters beside you, breaking the no-talking rule. Nobody corrects him. The journey is only supposed to take an hour, but it stretches to nearly 3 as your convoy navigates around destroyed bridges, roadblocks and areas of active fighting. Every minute is tense, your body rigid with fear, the rifle clutched in your sweaty hands. Finally the truck stops. You've arrived at the new location, a small clearing near a bombed-out village. The front lines are less than half a mile away. You can hear small arms fire in the distance. "Out and unload," the sergeant orders. "We need to be set up before first light." Exhausted from the journey and lack of sleep, you still have to unpack and reassemble the entire field kitchen. It's grueling work in the pre-dawn darkness, made more challenging by the need to stay quiet and avoid using lights that might attract enemy attention. The new position has one advantage, a small stream nearby that provides a water source, but it also has a major disadvantage. It's exposed on the eastern side, with only minimal tree cover separating you from potential German observation posts. "We'll have to camouflage the smoke," the sergeant says, examining the site. "Jenkins, rig up a dispersal system for the chimney. I don't want a column of smoke pointing the Krauts right to us." Jenkins nods. He's done this before, creating a system of baffles and covers that spreads the smoke from the cooking fires horizontally rather than letting it rise in a visible column. Dawn breaks as you finish setting up. Everyone is dead on their feet, having been awake for over 24 hours straight. But there's no rest, yet breakfast still needs to be prepared. "Simple meal this morning," the sergeant announces. "Oatmeal, coffee, hardtack. That's it. We don't have time for anything fancy." You're assigned to the coffee, perhaps the most important element of breakfast for men who've been fighting all night. The process is familiar enough to do on autopilot. Fill the massive pot with water from the stream, build a fire in the goulash canoni's firebox, bring the water to a boil, add the precious coffee grounds, let it brew. As the water heats, you hear a new sound cutting through the morning air, the distinctive crack of a sniper rifle, followed by the ping of a bullet hitting metal nearby. "Down," the sergeant roars. Everyone drops to the ground. Another shot rings out, this one striking one of the coffee pots, sending a spray of hot water into the air. "They can see us," Jenkins hisses. "Told you this position was too exposed." The sergeant crawls toward the nearest truck, keeping his body low. He returns moments later with a field radio. "Support coming," he says tersely. "Counter-sniper team, but we need to get the camouflage netting up now." For the next 20 minutes, you work in a terrifying game of cat and mouse. Staying low, moving in short bursts, you help string camouflage netting over the field kitchen. Every few minutes, the sniper takes another shot, keeping you pinned down but thankfully not hitting anyone. Finally, a squad from your unit arrives, including 2 snipers with scoped rifles. They immediately take positions at the edge of the clearing, scanning the tree line to the east. "Keep cooking," the squad leader tells you. "We'll handle the kraut." It's surreal, preparing breakfast while a sniper duel unfolds less than 100 yards away. The sharp crack of rifles punctuates the morning as you stir the oatmeal and salvage what's left of the coffee. Your hands shake, but you keep working. The men will be arriving for food soon, hungry after a night of combat. A final shot rings out, followed by a cheer from your unit's snipers. "Got him," the squad leader reports to your sergeant. "You should be clear now, but keep that netting up just in case." Breakfast is served under the camouflage netting, creating a strange, dappled light across the serving area. The men arrive in small groups, dirty and exhausted from overnight operations. Many have the hollow-eyed look of soldiers who've been in constant combat too long. "Sorry about the simple breakfast," you say to one particularly gaunt-looking private as you ladle oatmeal into his mess kit. "We had to move during the night." "Are you kidding?" he replies. "Hot food is hot food. We've been eating cold K rations for days." By mid-morning, the situation has stabilized somewhat. The immediate threat is gone, but the new reality of your position remains. You're now a forward field kitchen directly supporting frontline operations. The danger is constant. "Get some sleep," the sergeant tells the crew after breakfast is cleaned up. 2-hour shifts. I need everyone fresh for lunch prep. You find a spot under one of the trucks, curl up on your bedroll, and fall into an exhausted sleep almost instantly. It feels like only minutes have passed when Miller shakes you awake. "Your shift," he says. "Sergeant wants you on bread duty for lunch." Bread is tricky in field conditions. The portable ovens attached to the goulash kanona are temperamental at best, especially with the inconsistent fuel you're forced to use, but bread is also vital filling, transportable, and a comfort food that reminds men of home. You mix the dough quickly using the fortification techniques from the special manual. Extra protein from powdered milk, a little vegetable oil for fat, just enough sugar to feed the yeast. You've become expert at knowing the exact consistency by feeler skill no recipe can teach. While the dough rises, you help prepare the main courser pasta dish with what the supply officer optimistically labelled meat sauce. The actual meat content is questionable, but with enough tomato paste, herbs and careful seasoning, it becomes something appealingly food-like. The sound of vehicles approaching interrupts your work. Not the familiar rumble of American trucks, but something different. Everyone freezes. "Tigers," Jenkins says, his voice tight. "German tanks." The sergeant is already moving. "Get to the foxholes, now." You abandon the food and run for the nearest foxhole, diving in headfirst as the first shell whistles overhead. It explodes somewhere behind you, the concussion slamming into your back like a giant fist. More shells follow. The Germans can't see you directly thanks to the camouflage, but they're bracketing the area where they suspect you might be, walking artillery fire across the clearing in a deadly pattern. In the foxhole with you are Miller and a young cook's assistant named Parker, barely 18. Parker's face is white with terror, his body trembling uncontrollably. "First time under fire?" you ask him, trying to sound calmer than you feel. He nods, unable to speak. "Just keep your head down," you say. "It'll pass." But the barrage continues, intensifies. Dirt and debris rain down on your foxhole. The sound is overwhelming, not just the explosions, but the ripping, tearing sound of trees being shredded by shrapnel. They're gonna hit the kitchen, Miller says grimly. All that work for nothing. As if summoned by his words, a massive explosion erupts from the direction of the Gulash Canon. You risk a peek over the edge of the foxhole and your heart sinks. Direct hit. One of the trucks is burning and parts of the field kitchen are scattered across the clearing. The barrage continues for what feels like hours, but is probably only 20 minutes. When it finally stops, the silence is almost as shocking as the noise was. "Stay down," Miller warns as Parker makes to stand up. They always wait to see if anyone moves, then they start again. Sure enough, after a tense minute of silence, another shell screams in, exploding near where the sergeant's foxhole is located, then nothing. "Testing," Miller explains. "Seeing if they got us all." Another 5 minutes pass before the sergeant's voice rings out. "Sound off by Foxhole 1. 2 here," comes a reply from somewhere to your right. 3 here, Miller shouts, and so it goes, each foxhole reporting in. Miraculously, no one is dead, though several cooks have minor injuries from flying debris. When it's finally safe to emerge, the devastation is clear. One truck is completely destroyed. The Gulash Canon is damaged, but intact, the sturdy field kitchen having survived worse in its long service. Food and supplies are scattered everywhere, much of it unsalvageable. "Assess and report," the sergeant orders, his own face streaked with dirt and blood from a cut on his forehead. "I need to know what we can still use. The bread dough you were working on is covered in dirt and debris. The pasta is ruined. Most of the prepared food is contaminated by soil, shrapnel, or chemicals from the explosives. We've got canned goods that survived," Jenkins reports. "Some of the flour and sugar in sealed containers. Coffee's okay. Water tank is intact, but we need to test for contamination." The sergeant processes this information, his expression grim. "We've still got men to feed," he says finally. "We'll have to improvise. Again." Over the next few hours, you witness the incredible resilience of the field kitchen crew. The damaged equipment is repaired using parts salvaged from the destroyed truck. Clean water is hauled from the stream. New bread is mixed. Canned meat and vegetables are combined into a simple but nutritious stew. By some miracle, lunch is ready only an hour later than scheduled. It's not what was planned, but it's hot and fills the belly a minor victory snatched from disaster. As you serve the makeshift meal, you notice the men seem especially grateful today. Word of the artillery strike has spread. They know what the kitchen crew endured to feed them. "Heard you guys took a direct hit," a lieutenant says as you fill his mess kit. "Thanks for still getting chow ready. Means a lot to the men." You nod, too exhausted for words. The adrenaline that kept you going through the barrage and aftermath has drained away, leaving a bone-deep weariness. After lunch, as you're cleaning up, Parker approaches you. "I froze up," he says, shame evident in his voice. "During the shelling, I couldn't even talk." "Everyone freezes their first time," you reply. "What matters is you stayed in the foxhole like you were supposed to. And you're here now, helping. How do you get used to it?" he asks. You think about this. You don't, not really. You just learn to function despite it. It's the truth. 3 weeks at the front hasn't made the fear go away. It's just taught you to work through it, to keep cooking even as shells fall around you, to focus on the mission feeding the men no matter what. That night, as you finally collapse onto your bedroll, you find yourself thinking about how much has changed. When you first joined the kitchen crew, your biggest concerns were mundane peeling potatoes fast enough, keeping the sergeant happy, avoiding burns from the cooking fires. Now you live in a world where sniper fire interrupts breakfast preparation and artillery can destroy hours of work in seconds, where the simple act of delivering food to the men can mean risking your life, where eating might be a soldier's last act before dying in combat. Yet something else has changed too. A bond has formed among the kitchen crew, forged in shared danger and hardship. You're no longer just cooking together, you're surviving together. Every meal served is an act of defiance against the chaos of war. As sleep begins to claim you, you hear Miller's voice from nearby. "Hey," he says softly, "you know what's crazy? I actually miss the days when all we had to worry about was the sergeant yelling about potato peeling." You smile in the darkness. "We'll get back there," you murmur. "Just gotta survive this first." "Yeah," he replies. "One meal at a time. One meal at a time." It's become your mantra, your way of breaking the overwhelming task of war into manageable pieces. Just like the soldiers fight one battle at a time, you fight your war one meal at a time. As you drift off to sleep, the sound of distant artillery, your macabre lullaby, you wonder what tomorrow's meal will bring. But for now, in your warm, safe bed at home, so different from that hard ground beneath a destroyed field kitchen, you can rest, knowing that today, at least, you won those small battles. You kept the men fed. You survived. And in war, sometimes that's enough. The first snowflake lands on your nose as you're hauling water from the stream. By the time you make it back to the field kitchen, white flakes swirl through the air, catching in your eyelashes and melting against your skin. "Perfect," Jenkins mutters, glancing skyward. "Just what we needed. Winter in goddamn Germany." It's mid-November 1944. The Allied advance has slowed as supply lines stretch thin and German resistance stiffens. Your unit has been in the same position for nearly 3 weeks, the longest you've stayed anywhere since joining the front lines. Snow means the mud might finally freeze, you point out, trying to find the silver lining. The autumn rains have turned everything into a quagmire, making every task twice as difficult. "Yeah, and then we get to deal with frostbite and frozen pipes instead," Jenkins replies. "I was in the Ardennes in 40. Trust me, kid, you'd rather have mud." The sergeant approaches, his breath visible in the increasingly cold air. "Weather report says this is just the beginning. Big storm coming. I want all equipment winterized by end of day." Winterizing the field kitchen is a process you've trained for but never actually implemented. It involves wrapping pipes with insulation, setting up windbreaks around the cooking areas, digging storage pits in the ground to keep certain foods from freezing solid, and preparing the goulash kanone for operation in sub-zero temperatures. Miller, you and Parker dig the storage pits, deep enough that they won't freeze through. You, he points at you, work with Jenkins on insulating the water system. If our pipes freeze, we're screwed. By midday, the snow is falling steadily. A white blanket covers the camp, beautiful in a way that almost makes you forget the war until the distant crump of artillery breaks the silence. Germans usually ease up on shelling in bad weather, Jenkins tells you as you wrap pipes with strips of wool blanket. Their spotters can't see targets as well, but don't count on it. "What's the worst winter condition you've cooked in?" you ask, trying to get a sense of what's coming. Jenkins pauses, thinking. Belgium, early 40, temperature hit 15 below zero, cooking oil froze solid, bread dough was like concrete, coffee froze in the mugs before the men could finish drinking it. He shakes his head at the memory, lost 2 fingers to frostbite that winter. He holds up his left hand, showing the stumps where his pinky and ring finger should be. You've noticed the missing digits before, but never asked about them. How'd it happen? Spilled boiling water on my glove. Had to take it off to dry. By the time I realised how bad the frostbite was, it was too late. He flexes his remaining fingers. Could have been worse. A cook from another unit lost his whole hand, grabbed a metal pot without gloves, skin stuck to it like touching a frozen pump handle. His matter-of-fact tone chills you more than the falling snow. This isn't just uncomfortable weather, it's potentially lethal. By evening, 3 inches of snow blanket the camp, and the temperature has dropped dramatically. The winterizing is complete, but now you face a new challenge: dinner preparation in freezing conditions. We're switching to one-pot meals whenever possible, the sergeant announces. Less exposure, less fuel, less chance for things to go wrong. Tonight is stew. Heavy on potatoes and whatever vegetables we've got left. The whatever we've got left part is concerning. Supply deliveries have become increasingly sporadic as winter weather affects the roads. Your last proper resupply was over a week ago, and stocks are running dangerously low. Inventory check, the sergeant orders, pointing at you and Miller. I need to know exactly what we've got and how long it will last. The inventory is grim. Flour for maybe 4 more days of bread. Potatoes for 3 days if you stretch them. Coffee, the lifeblood of the army, down to enough for just 2 days. Meat is practically non-existent. Just a few cans of mystery protein that might be beef or might be worse. We're going to have to forage, the sergeant says after reviewing your findings. Local farms, abandoned villages, anything we can find. Sir, most of those areas haven't been fully cleared of enemy troops, you remind him. I'm aware of the risk, Private. That's why you'll go with a security detail. He looks you in the eye. First light tomorrow, dress warm. That night, dinner is a thin stew that barely qualifies as food, mostly water with chunks of potato, a few withered carrots, and precisely 1 piece of meat per serving. The bread is yesterday's loaves, slightly stale but edible when dipped in the broth. The men don't complain. They've grown accustomed to diminishing rations as winter approaches. They eat quickly, stamping their feet against the cold, then hurry back to whatever shelter they've found or created. Sleep comes fitfully in your freezing tent. The army-issue sleeping bag is barely adequate, and you find yourself wearing every piece of clothing you own, including your helmet liner as an extra hat. Still, the cold seeps in, keeping you hovering on the edge of sleep without ever fully succumbing. Morning arrives with a temperature well below freezing and another inch of snow. Your breath creates a small cloud inside the tent. Getting out of your sleeping bag requires a level of willpower you didn't know you possessed. Breakfast is precious coffee that you can't afford to waste, but desperately need, and hardtack biscuits spread with a thin layer of margarine. The coffee is half strength, stretched to make the dwindling supply last longer. After breakfast, you report to the sergeant, who introduces you to a stern-faced lieutenant and 3 infantrymen. This is your security detail, the sergeant explains. Lieutenant Harker knows the area. There's a farm about 3 miles east that should still have root vegetables in storage. Maybe livestock if we're lucky. The lieutenant looks you up and down. Ever done this before, Cook? No, sir, you admit. Stay close. Do exactly what I say and we'll be fine. He checks his watch. We move in 5 minutes. Bring empty sacks and that cart if it can handle the snow. The cart in question is a small 2-wheeled affair you normally use for transporting food from the kitchen to outlying positions. Its thin wheels aren't ideal for snow, but it's better than carrying everything by hand. The journey is brutally cold. The wind has picked up, driving the snow horizontally into your face despite the scarves wrapped around your head. Your fingers and toes go numb within the first mile, despite the layers of socks and gloves. Germans were through here last week, the lieutenant says, as you pass a burned-out Sherman tank half buried in snow. Most pulled back north, but there could be stragglers or patrols. Stay alert. The farm appears after nearly 2 hours of trudging through deepening snow. It's a typical German farmhouse with a large barn and several outbuildings. No smoke rises from the chimney. No tracks mar the snow around it, abandoned, at least temporarily. "Anderson, Peters, check the house," the lieutenant orders. "Williams, with me on the barn. Cook, stay put until we clear the buildings." You wait, stamping your feet to keep blood flowing, watching your breath form clouds in the frigid air. After 10 tense minutes, the all-clear comes. House is empty, Anderson reports. Looks like the family left in a hurry, some personal belongings still there. "Barn's clear too," the lieutenant adds. "And we hit the jackpot. Root cellar under the barn floor, full of potatoes, turnips, carrots, even some preserved meat." Your heart leaps. This could sustain your unit for days, maybe weeks. "There's livestock too," Williams adds. 3 pigs, dozen chickens. Someone's been feeding them recently. The lieutenant considers this. Means someone might come back. "We need to move fast." He turns to you. "Get what we need from the cellar first. We'll decide about the livestock after." The root cellar is a dirt-floored room beneath the barn, accessed by a trapdoor. Wooden shelves line the walls, stocked with burlap sacks of vegetables and glass jars of preserved foods. It's a treasure trove in wartime. You work quickly, loading the cart with potatoes, turnips, and other root vegetables that can survive the journey back to camp. The preserved meat, mostly pork by the look of it, is carefully packed on top. You add jars of pickled vegetables and preserved fruits. As you work, a moral dilemma gnaws at you. This is someone's winter food supply. A family might return to find their stores depleted, potentially facing starvation themselves. "Sir," you approach the lieutenant, "should we leave some of this for the family?" He gives you a hard look. "Our orders are to sustain our fighting force. These people chose to support Hitler. Our men come first." You nod, uncomfortable but unwilling to argue. War force's impossible choices. Today, your men will eat. What happens to the German family is not your responsibility. At least that's what you tell yourself as you continue loading the cart. The decision about the livestock is made for you when distant gunfire erupts. "German patrol," the lieutenant says tersely, peering through binoculars. "Maybe half a mile out, moving this way." He makes a quick decision. Leave the animals, grab what we've got, and move. Now. The return journey is even more grueling. The cart, now heavily laden, repeatedly gets stuck in the snow. Your security detail takes turns helping you haul it while maintaining vigilance for the German patrol. Every few hundred yards, you stop to listen. The sound of gunfire has faded, but the knowledge that enemy troops are in the area keeps everyone on edge. If we're engaged, the lieutenant tells you quietly during one such stop, abandon the cart and run for those trees. Don't try to be a hero. The food's important, but not worth dying for. You nod, hoping it doesn't come to that. After all you've been through to get these supplies, leaving them behind would feel like a personal failure. The last mile back to camp is the hardest. Your muscles scream with fatigue. The cold has penetrated every layer of clothing. Your face is raw from the wind, but the sight of the Gulash Kanoni's chimney in the distance gives you a second wind. We made it, you breathe as you cross into the camp perimeter. The sergeant meets you, his face lighting up at the sight of the loaded cart. Good work, he says, actually clapping you on the shoulder. This will make a big difference. That night, dinner is a hearty stew made with the foraged vegetables and preserved pork. There's enough for seconds, even thirds. The men's spirits lift noticeably with the improved meal. Where'd all this come from? Miller asks as he helps you prepare the food. Farm to the east, you reply. Abandoned. Lucky for us, he says, then gives you a knowing look. Not so lucky for whoever lived there. You say nothing, still uncomfortable with the moral compromise, but when you see the faces of the men as they receive their full rations, their evident relief and gratitude, it's easier to justify the decision. The next morning brings fresh challenges. The temperature has dropped even further, and the water pipes have frozen despite your insulation efforts. We need to thaw them without bursting them, Jenkins says, examining the solid ice visible in a section of clear tubing, and we need water for breakfast. We can melt snow, you suggest, looking at the white blanket covering everything. Do you have any idea how much snow you need to melt to get a useful amount of water? Jenkins shakes his head. It takes about 10 gallons of snow to make 1 gallon of water, and it's slow. Nevertheless, with no other option, you begin the laborious process of melting snow in every available container. The heat from the cooking fires helps, but it's painfully inefficient. I've got an idea, Miller says after watching your struggle. He disappears into the supply tent and returns with a large tarp. We spread this out, pile snow on it, and angle it toward containers. The dark colour will absorb sunlight and melt the snow faster. It's clever, and it works somewhat. By combining this method with directly melting snow in pots, you manage to gather enough water for the morning's cooking needs. The frozen pipes prove more challenging. Jenkins fashions a system using heated cloths wrapped around the pipes, gradually thawing them section by section without causing them to burst. It's painstaking work that takes most of the day. This is just the beginning, he tells you as you work together. Winter's barely started. It'll get worse. He's right. Over the next week, conditions deteriorate further. The temperature rarely rises above freezing. Snow falls intermittently, accumulating to nearly a foot in some areas. The ground freezes solid, making it impossible to dig new latrines or storage pits. Cooking becomes an exercise in battling the elements. Bread dough freezes if left exposed for more than a few minutes. Water for cooking must be kept constantly heated, or it turns to ice. The fat in meat solidifies almost instantly when removed from heat. Your hands suffer the worst. Constantly exposed to the alternating extremes of freezing air and boiling pots, the skin cracks and bleeds. Chilblains, painful, inflammatory swellings develop on your fingers. Every movement becomes painful. Petroleum jelly, the sergeant advises, tossing you a small tin. Won't cure it, but helps prevent it from getting worse. Rub it in whenever you can. The petroleum jelly helps somewhat, but nothing truly alleviates the constant discomfort. You notice all the veteran cooks have similar hands-scracked, reddened, scarred from years of this abuse. Fuel becomes another critical concern. The wood you've gathered is often too wet to burn efficiently. Coal is practically non-existent. The specialised fuel for the Gulash Kanona is strictly rationed. We need to be smart about this, the sergeant tells the kitchen crew. One fire, used for multiple purposes. No individual cooking, no heating water just to wash unless absolutely necessary for sanitation. The men begin bringing their own fuel when they come for meals, scraps of wood, pieces of broken equipment, anything that might burn. It's a violation of regulations to burn military property, but the sergeant turns a blind eye. Survival trumps rules. One particularly cold morning, you're struggling to light the main cooking fire with damp wood when Parker approaches. "Try this," he says, handing you a small tin of whitish paste. It's improvised fire starter, mix of candle wax and cotton from medical supplies, works even with wet wood. "Where'd you get it?" you ask, impressed by his ingenuity. "Made it," he shrugs. "My dad taught me. We used to go camping in winter back home." The fire starter works brilliantly. Within minutes you have a strong blaze despite the poor quality wood. It's a small victory, but in winter warfare those small victories keep you alive. Delivering food to outlying positions becomes another life-threatening challenge. The Mermite containers, designed to keep food hot for hours, still lose heat rapidly in sub-zero temperatures. By the time you reach the furthest foxholes, the food is often barely above freezing. "We need to modify the containers," you suggest to the sergeant after one particularly difficult delivery where the men received essentially cold stew. "Maybe add an extra layer of insulation or some kind of chemical heat pack?" The sergeant considers this. "Let me talk to the engineers. They might have some ideas or materials we can use." The solution, when it comes, is both simple and ingenious. The engineers provide soapstone blocks that can be heated in the cooking fires, then placed in a special compartment added to the bottom of each Mermite container. The stones hold heat for hours, keeping the food warm even on the longest deliveries. It's a small improvement, but the gratitude on the faces of the men receiving properly hot food in their frozen foxholes makes every difficult journey worthwhile. As December arrives, another enemy joins the cold. Disease. Respiratory infections spread rapidly through the camp. Men weakened by cold, exhaustion, and less than ideal nutrition fall prey to bronchitis, pneumonia, and other ailments. The field hospital, already busy with combat casualties, fills with coughing, feverish soldiers. Special dietary requirements for the sick add another layer of complexity to your cooking duties. They need liquid nutrition, the medical officer explains, providing a list of modifications: broths, thinned porridge, hot drinks with high sugar content for energy. Despite the challenges, or perhaps because of them, the kitchen crew grows closer. You share techniques for keeping warm. Take turns at the most exposed positions, watch for signs of frostbite on each other. What began as a collection of individuals thrown together by war has become something like a family. One night, as you all huddle around the dying cooking fire before turning in, Miller raises a tin cup of the day's last coffee. "To making it through another day," he says, "and to all of us crazy bastards who chose to be cooks instead of infantry. To warm food and cold nights," Jenkins adds. "To surviving winter," you contribute, raising your own cup. The coffee is weak, the night is freezing, and tomorrow will bring the same challenges all over again. But in this moment there's a sense of camaraderie that makes it all somewhat bearable. As you eventually crawl into your sleeping bag, adding your coat as an extra layer against the brutal cold, you think about how different your perception of winter has become. Before the war, winter meant Christmas, snow days, the beauty of freshly fallen snow. Now it's a deadly adversary, a force to be battled daily just to survive. Yet there's a strange pride in this struggle too. Anyone can cook in a well-supplied kitchen with modern conveniences. It takes a special kind of determination, maybe a special kind of crazy to produce meals in freezing conditions with minimal supplies and equipment. Sleep comes easier tonight, despite the cold. Your exhausted body surrenders to it quickly. Your last conscious thought is a comparison between your current situation and the warm, comfortable bed you once took for granted back home. So different from your bed right now, warm and snug, safe from the elements, with no need to worry about frozen pipes or frostbite or whether there will be enough food tomorrow, as you sink deeper into your comfortable pillows far from the brutal winter of 1944. Remember how fortunate you are to have these simple luxuries that those field cooks could only dream about. Mail call. 2 simple words that transform the entire camp. Men emerge from tents and foxholes like groundhogs after winter, faces lighting up with anticipation. Even the kitchen crew pauses their endless work, hearts quickening at the possibility of news from home. It's late December 1944. The winter has tightened its grip, but the worst enemy now isn't the cold or even the Germans. It's the creeping despair that comes with months of combat, separation from loved ones, and the looming reality that despite Allied advances, this war isn't ending anytime soon. The mail jeep, caked with mud and snow, pulls up near the field kitchen. The driver, a cheerful corporal with a Santa hat perched on his helmet, jumps out with several bags of letters and packages. "Got a big one for the kitchen crew," he announces, hefting a large parcel. "From the Ladies' Auxiliary in Milwaukee." The sergeant takes the package, examining the label. "Well, I'll be damned. It's addressed to the boys keeping our soldiers fed." "Someone finally remembered us," Jenkins says, with a wry smile. "Only took 3 years of war." The package is opened with reverent care. Inside, homemade cookies carefully wrapped to prevent breaking. Real coffee, not the army issue stuff that tastes like burnt dirt. Small bottles of spices, chocolate bars, hand-knitted socks, and letters, dozens of them. From school children and mothers and wives, all thanking the forgotten heroes of the war. The cooks. "Dear brave army cooks," the sergeant reads aloud from one letter, his voice gruff with suppressed emotion. "My son writes that the only thing keeping him going some days is a hot meal. Thank you for taking care of my boy when I cannot." A strange silence falls over the kitchen crew. Recognition, genuine gratitude is something none of you are accustomed to receiving. "Well," the sergeant says finally, clearing his throat, "let's put this stuff to good use. Christmas is coming. Time to start planning something special. Christmas." The word hits differently here, thousands of miles from home, in the middle of war. For most men, it will be their 2nd or 3rd Christmas overseas. The homesickness, always present, becomes acute during holidays, a pain as real as any physical wound. "What can we possibly do that's special?" Miller asks. "We barely have enough for regular meals." The sergeant looks at the care package, then at the food store's meagre, but recently supplemented by another foraging expedition to abandoned farms. "We get creative," he says, "just like always. But this time we're not just feeding bodies, we're feeding souls." Over the next few days, alongside regular meals, the kitchen crew begins secret preparations for a Christmas feast. Every member contributes ideas from their own family traditions. "My mum always made these potato pancakes," Miller explains, sketching the recipe from memory. Latkes. Jewish tradition. But everyone loved them. "We had ham," Jenkins offers. "Glazed with brown sugar and pineapple, though I don't suppose we'll find a ham out here." "My family did tamales," Parker says, "corn husks filled with mesa and meat, steamed. My grandmother would start making them days before Christmas. You share your own tradition. Apple pie. My mother would use dried apples when fresh weren't available." The sergeant listens to all these ideas, nodding thoughtfully. "We'll take elements from each, create something new, something that represents all of us." Planning the Christmas meal becomes a welcome distraction from the grim realities of winter warfare. In stolen moments between regular duties, you experiment with recipes adapted to available ingredients. The spices from the care package prove invaluable: cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves that can transform army rations into something resembling festive food. The sergeant arranges a special supply drop, calling in favours from contacts at division headquarters. It arrives 3 days before Christmas. A small amount of ham, real butter, canned yams, even some dried fruit. Don't ask how I got it, he tells the awestruck kitchen crew. Just make it count. News of the planned Christmas feast spreads through the unit. Men who had been withdrawn, battling the dangerous combination of cold, fear, and despair, suddenly have something to look forward to. The change in atmosphere is palpable. One hot meal isn't going to win the war, Jenkins comments, as you work together on bread dough infused with cinnamon and the precious raisins from the care package. No, you agree, but it might help some of these guys remember what they're fighting for. 2 days before Christmas, tragedy strikes. A German artillery barrage hits the adjacent company area. Casualties are high. The field hospital overflows with wounded. The mood, which had briefly lifted with the promise of Christmas, plummets. Should we cancel the feast? Miller asks the sergeant privately. Doesn't seem right to celebrate with so many men down. The sergeant considers this, then shakes his head firmly. We need it now more than ever, but we make an addition to the plan. We serve the wounded first in the field hospital. Special trays, best portions, show them they're not forgotten. On Christmas Eve, while regular evening chow is served, the kitchen crew works through the night preparing the feast. The goulash canone burns continuously, its heat a blessing against the freezing air. You rotate positions working near the fire until you're sweating, then moving to outer tasks until the cold becomes unbearable, then back to the fire. The ham is carefully portioned to ensure every man gets at least a small taste. The canned yams are mashed with butter and the last of the sugar, then topped with crumbled cookies from the care package to simulate the candied sweet potatoes of home. Miller's potato pancakes take shape. Though without enough oil to properly fry them, they're more like seasoned potato patties. Still, the familiar scent brings a smile to his face. For dessert, you create a bread pudding using the cinnamon raisin bread, powdered milk, saved egg powder, and melted chocolate from the care package. It's not apple pie, but the warm, sweet aroma evokes the same feeling of home and comfort. By dawn on Christmas morning, exhausted but satisfied, the kitchen crew has performed something like a miracle, a holiday feast created from military rations and scavenged supplies in the middle of a war zone. Get 2 hours sleep, the sergeant orders. Then we start serving. Hospital first, then the lines. Those 2 hours of sleep are dreamless and deep despite the uncomfortable conditions. When you wake, it's to the sound of Christmas carols being sung somewhere in the camp-off key, but heartfelt. The meal service begins at the field hospital. You and Jenkins carefully transport special trays to the wounded, each containing small portions of everything: ham, sweet potatoes, potato pancakes, bread, and dessert. It's not much by civilian standards, but in this context, it's a banquet. "Merry Christmas, fellas," Jenkins says as you enter the hospital tent. "Special delivery." The wounded men, some bandaged, some on plasma drips, some barely conscious, react with disbelief that gradually transforms into profound gratitude. "Is that ham?" asks a soldier with his arm in a cast, his eyes widening. "Yes, sir, genuine American ham," you confirm, placing a tray on his lap. "Along with all the trimmings." A medic approaches, concern on his tired face. Some of these men are on restricted diets, liquid only for those with abdominal wounds. "Got that covered," you say, producing several containers of specially prepared broth, the ham cooking liquid, enhanced with pureed vegetables and strained to a smooth consistency. All the flavour, none of the solids. The medic's expression softens. "You guys thought of everything. Moving from bed to bed, you serve each wounded soldier. Some are too injured to respond beyond a nod or faint smile. Others express their thanks verbally, sometimes with colourful language that makes you grin. "Holy shit, real food," one private with a bandaged leg exclaims. "I thought I was hallucinating from the morphine." What strikes you most is how many of them ask about their buddies, concerned that men still in the line get their share before the hospital patients. That selflessness, that brotherhood, is something civilians back home might never fully understand. One soldier, older than most, catches your arm as you place a tray beside him. "My first Christmas away from home was in the last war," he says, his voice weak but determined. "Nobody did anything special, just another day of beans and hardtack in a trench. This," he gestures at the meal, "this matters more than you know." By the time you finish at the hospital, the main serving line is set up back at the field kitchen. Word has spread and men arrive early, forming a line that stretches through the camp despite the bitter cold. The sergeant has arranged for each man to receive his feast in stages, moving through a line with different stations for each component of the meal. This creates a sense of abundance, the illusion of choice and plenty in a situation defined by scarcity and necessity. You man the dessert station, serving your bread pudding with a drizzle of the last precious maple syrup found in the care package. The expressions on the men's faces as they receive this unexpected treat are worth every hour of sleep lost in its preparation. "Tastes like my mum's," one young private says, closing his eyes as he takes a bite. "How'd you do that?" "Magic," you reply with a wink. "And cinnamon. Lots of cinnamon." As the day progresses, the mood in the camp transforms. Men linger after eating, talking and laughing instead of hurrying back to their positions. Some share treats from their own care packages from home. A few produce instruments, a harmonica, a small accordion, a makeshift drum, and music joins the celebration. The German artillery, as if honouring some unspoken Christmas truce, remains silent for the day. The skies clear and weak winter sunlight breaks through, glittering on the snow nature's own Christmas decoration. By evening, when the last man has been served and the kitchen crew finally sits down to their own meal, there's a sense of achievement that transcends the usual satisfaction of a duty completed. "To the best damn kitchen crew in the European theatre," the sergeant toasts, raising a cup of the good coffee from the care package. "You performed a miracle today." "Wasn't a miracle," Jenkins corrects him. "Just good cooking under impossible conditions. Our specialty." You eat slowly, savouring flavours that have become rare luxuries: salt, fat, sweetness. The conversation flows easily, the shared accomplishment creating a warmth that has nothing to do with the nearby fire. "Think they'll remember this?" Parker asks during a lull in the talk. "The men, I mean, when they go home after the war, think they'll remember one Christmas meal in the middle of nowhere?" Jenkins considers this. "They might not remember what they ate, but they'll remember how it made them feel. Like someone gave a damn, like they weren't just anonymous bodies being fed enough to keep fighting." He shrugs. "That's what matters." The next day, the war resumes its normal rhythm. Artillery fire in the distance, patrols going out, sometimes not all returning, the cold continuing its assault on body and spirit. But something has changed, a subtle shift in the unit's collective mood. Men stand a little straighter, smiles come a little easier. The invisible weight of despair has lightened, if only slightly. As January progresses, you notice another change. Men bringing small tokens of appreciation to the kitchen crew, a captured German chocolate bar, extra cigarettes from a care package, a bottle of French wine liberated from an abandoned cellar, small gestures that speak volumes about how perceptions have shifted. "They finally figured out we're not just slinging slop," Miller says, after a lieutenant presents him with a fine fountain pen in thanks for the Christmas feast. "We're keeping them alive in more ways than one." One cold morning in mid-January, as you're preparing breakfast, a jeep arrives from division headquarters. A colonel steps out, not the quartermaster this time, but someone from operations, judging by his insignia. He speaks briefly with your sergeant, who then calls the kitchen crew together. "New orders," the sergeant announces. "The front is moving again. We're pushing into Germany proper. Our unit moves out tomorrow morning." A collective groan rises from the crew, quickly silenced by the sergeant's raised hand. "There's more," he continues. "Division has recognized the importance of morale in this final push. They're implementing what they're calling a forward comfort initiative. Special supplies for hot food, even in combat zones." He pauses, a rare smile crossing his face. "Apparently our Christmas operation got noticed by the brass. They're using our methods as a template." Pride blooms in your chest, unexpected, unfamiliar, but welcome. In a war where recognition usually comes posthumously, this acknowledgement of your work feels monumental. "Does this mean better supplies?" Jenkins asks, always practical. "Some," the sergeant nods. "And priority on transport for kitchen equipment. They've finally realised that an army with hot food fights better than one on cold rations." That night, as you pack up for the move, Miller sits beside you, both of you taking a rare break to smoke a cigarette in the shelter of a supply tent. "You know what's crazy?" he says, watching the smoke curl in the cold air. "When this all started, I thought being a cook was the worst job in the army. All the work, none of the glory." He takes another drag. "Now I wouldn't trade it for anything. We're making a difference, not by killing, but by keeping people alive, body and soul." You nod, understanding exactly what he means. "Never thought food could mean so much." "It's not just food," he replies. "It's home. It's normal life. It's proof that somewhere in this crazy war, humanity still exists." He flicks his cigarette into the snow. "Pretty heavy stuff for a couple of guys who just wanted to avoid the infantry, huh?" You laugh, but he's right. Somewhere along the way, this job became a calling. The simple act of feeding men in the worst circumstances possible has become something approaching sacred. As you settle into your sleeping bag for the last night in this position, you reflect on the journey so far, from the basic training kitchen with its mountains of potatoes to the frontline goulash cannone under artillery fire, from cooking by rote to creating meals that sustain not just bodies, but spirits. From a random collection of men thrown together by war to a tightly bonded team that functions like a family. Tomorrow brings a new phase of the war, new challenges, new dangers, new opportunities to prove that even in the darkest times, something as simple as a hot meal can be revolutionary. As sleep approaches, you find yourself thinking of home not with the sharp pain of homesickness that once characterized such thoughts, but with a gentler nostalgia. You'll appreciate your mother's kitchen differently when you return. The abundance of food, the luxury of cooking without fear of artillery, the simple miracle of fresh ingredients. If you return. Because despite the improved morale, despite the recognition from headquarters, despite everything, this is still war. And war takes without asking, without discrimination, without mercy. The Rhine River stretches before you wide and grey in the early morning light. On the far bank lies Germany proper, the heartland of the Third Reich. The air tastes different somehow, charged with the knowledge that you're witnessing history. "Hell of a view," Jenkins says, coming to stand beside you. "Never thought I'd see it." It's March 1945. After months of brutal fighting through winter, the Allied forces have reached this crucial barrier. Engineers work frantically to construct pontoon bridges across the river, replacing those destroyed by retreating German forces. Your field kitchen is set up half a mile back, feeding the endless stream of men and equipment moving toward the crossing point. The pace is frantic. The generals want to maintain momentum to cross before the Germans can reorganize their defense. We're crossing tomorrow, the sergeant announces during dinner preparation. Our unit will be in the third wave. We need to break down the kitchen tonight, ready to move at 0400. We crossing with the troops? Miller asks, the concern evident in his voice. The Rhine crossing is expected to meet heavy resistance. No, we'll wait until the bridgehead is secured, then bring the kitchen across. Should be late tomorrow, assuming everything goes according to plan. Everyone knows that in war nothing ever goes according to plan. That night, as you dismantle the field kitchen, an artillery barrage opens up, the Germans targeting the assembly areas near the river. The sky lights up with explosions, the ground trembling beneath your feet. Keep working, the sergeant orders. We need to be ready to move no matter what. By midnight, everything is packed and loaded onto trucks. The kitchen crew gathers in a small tent, unable to sleep through the continuing bombardment. The conversation turns, as it often does before major operations, to home. First thing I'm going to do when I get back, Miller says, lighting a cigarette, is ask my mother to cook me a steak. A real one, thick as my thumb, with fried potatoes and gravy. Beer, Jenkins contributes. A cold beer that wasn't brewed in someone's helmet. Hot bath, Parker adds. Gonna soak until my skin wrinkles up like a raisin. What about you? Miller asks, turning to you. You consider the question. After all you've experienced, the simple pleasures of home seem almost unimaginable. Sleep, you finally answer, in a real bed with clean sheets for about a week straight. They laugh, but it's a laugh of understanding. Sleep, real, safe, comfortable sleep has become the most precious commodity in your world. At 0400, the sergeant rouses everyone. Change of plans, he announces. The crossing has been delayed. German resistance is heavier than expected. Through the morning, you watch as more artillery is brought up, as bombers fly overhead toward German positions, as the methodical machinery of war adjusts to the unexpected obstacle. Your kitchen remains packed, ready to move, which means you're limited to cold rations and hastily boiled coffee for the waiting troops. They need hot food, the sergeant says, watching the men huddled in foxholes and behind vehicles, some having been in position for over 24 hours now. We can't set up the full kitchen, but we need to do something. What about the emergency setup, you suggest? The one from the manual? The emergency field kitchen setup is designed for exactly this situation, a stripped-down version using minimal equipment that can be quickly assembled and disassembled. You've practiced it during training but never implemented it in the field. The sergeant considers this, then nods. Do it. Use the small truck as a windbreak. Keep everything low profile. With Jenkins and Miller, you quickly unpack the essential components. A small, smokeless stove, 2 medium cooking pots, basic utensils, and the lightweight, insulated food containers. The setup is designed to produce 1 hot item soup, stew, or porridge in quantity. What can we make with what we've got unpacked? The sergeant asks. You assess the readily available supplies, canned meat, dried beans, some root vegetables, flour, salt, and a few precious spices saved from the Christmas care package. Bean and meat stew, you decide. Filling, high protein, can be stretched with flour to thicken it. We can have it ready in 2 hours. Do it, the sergeant orders. I'll arrange for runners to deliver it to the forward positions. Working with practiced efficiency, you and the kitchen crew prepare the emergency meal. The small stove is harder to regulate than the goulash kanone, requiring constant attention to prevent the stew from burning. Without proper ventilation, the smoke makes your eyes water despite the stove's smokeless design. As you cook, the artillery duel intensifies. German shells fall closer to your position. The ground shakes continuously. Twice you have to pause to take cover when incoming fire becomes too close for comfort. They've spotted the crossing point, Jenkins says grimly after a particularly close explosion. They're walking their fire up and down the bank. Despite the danger, you continue cooking. The stew takes shape-rich, thick, aromatic with the careful addition of spices. It's not fancy, but it will provide the energy and comfort the men need before crossing into the teeth of German defences. The runners arrive just as the stew is ready, young privates who will carry insulated containers to the waiting troops. They look nervous, aware that their mission will take them through areas being actively targeted by German artillery. Keep low, move fast, the sergeant instructs them. This food might be the last hot meal these men get for days. As the runners depart, laden with the precious cargo, you feel the familiar mix of pride and concern. Pride in providing sustenance under impossible conditions. Concern for the men who will risk their lives to deliver it, and for those who wait to receive it. Now we wait, the sergeant says, and stay ready to move. The waiting is perhaps the hardest part. Hours pass as reports filter back the bridgehead established but under heavy counterattack, casualties mounting, the situation fluid. Your unit remains in reserve, ready to cross once the area is secured. Night falls, bringing no respite from the artillery or the tension. Sleep comes in brief snatches, interrupted by explosions or urgent updates. The kitchen remains packed, limiting you to providing only the most basic sustenance. Dawn breaks on the second day of the crossing operation. The sergeant gathers the kitchen crew with news. "We're crossing today," he announces. "The engineers have a bridge that's holding. Our unit moves in 2 hours." The crossing itself is a nightmare etched into your memory forever. The pontoon bridge sways under the weight of vehicles. German artillery continues to target the area, shells splashing into the water perilously close to the structure. Luftwaffe planes appear suddenly, strafing the exposed crossing before Allied fighters drive them off. Your truck, loaded with the precious kitchen equipment, inches across the bridge, surrounded by infantry, tanks, and other support vehicles. Everyone is exposed, vulnerable. The driver white-knuckles the steering wheel, eyes fixed forward, ignoring the chaos around him with almost supernatural focus. "Don't look down," Miller mutters beside you in the cab. "Just don't look down." Of course, you immediately look down at the dark water churning below, at the bodies floating downstream, at the partially submerged vehicles from previous failed crossing attempts. The war has never felt more immediate, more terrifying than in this moment of perfect vulnerability. An explosion rocks the bridge 50 yards ahead. A truck is hit, flames erupting from its canvas cover. Men jump or are thrown into the water. "Keep moving," someone shouts. "Clear the bridge." Your driver navigates around the burning vehicle, the heat searing through the closed windows of your cab. For a moment you're certain this is it, that your journey ends here, on this makeshift bridge, without ever setting foot on German soil. Then you're past the wreckage, the truck picking up speed as it reaches the far bank, German soil beneath your wheels. The driver doesn't stop, continuing inland away from the exposed riverbank. Only when you've reached a small copse of trees about a mile from the river does he finally pull over, his hands shaking as he cuts the engine. "Made it," he breathes, seeming surprised by this fact. "We actually made it." The rest of the kitchen crew arrives in stages, the sergeant in a jeep, Jenkins and Parker in another truck, the remaining equipment in a third. By some miracle, everything and everyone has made it across intact. "Set up here," the sergeant orders once everyone has arrived. The line companies are moving forward, but they'll need resupply by evening. "I want hot food ready." The routine of setting up the field kitchen provides a welcome distraction from the lingering terror of the crossing. The familiar tasks ground you in the present, unloading equipment, assembling the goulash cannone, organising supplies, starting fires. By mid-afternoon, the kitchen is operational, a small miracle of logistics and determination. The menu is simple but substantial beef stew with root vegetables, bread baked in the goulash cannone's oven, and coffee. After days of cold rations, it will taste like a feast to the men on the line. As evening approaches, the sounds of combat grow more distant, a good sign that the advance is proceeding. The first groups of men begin to rotate back for food, their faces grimy with dirt and smoke, their eyes holding the vacant look that comes from too much combat in too short a time. "How's it going up there?" you ask a sergeant from one of the line companies as you serve him. "We're pushing them back," he replies, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. "But they're making us pay for every inch. Snipers, booby traps, the works." He looks down at the steaming food in his mess kit. "This is the first time I've stopped moving since we crossed. Thanks." Word spreads quickly that the kitchen is up and running. Men arrive in increasing numbers, some walking miles from forward positions just for a hot meal. The gratitude is palpable, expressed in nods, in quiet thanks, in the careful way they clean their mess kits to avoid wasting a single morsel. That night, as the kitchen crew finally sits down to their own meal, the sergeant shares the latest news. "We've advanced 12 miles since crossing," he says. "Resistance is stiffening, but the momentum is with us. Command says we're seeing the beginning of the end. They've been saying that since D-Day," Jenkins remarks dryly. "This time it might be true," the sergeant replies. "The Germans are running out of men, equipment, everything. Intelligence says they're drafting old men and boys now." The thought of the war potentially ending of going home feels almost as unreal as the thought of being here once did. You've been a soldier, a cook, for so long that civilian life seems like a distant dream. "What happens to us?" Parker asks. "After, I mean, if it really ends soon." The sergeant shrugs. "Occupation duty, probably. Someone's going to have to feed the occupation forces." The conversation turns to the future, to plans and hopes long suppressed by the immediate demands of survival. It's cautious talk. No one wants to tempt fate by being too optimistic, but it's the first time such discussions have felt anything but futile fantasy. The next morning brings new orders. The front has moved again, pushing deeper into Germany. Your unit needs to follow, maintaining the critical supply line. "Pack up," the sergeant orders. "We move in 1 hour." And so it goes, day after day, week after week. The field kitchen becomes a mobile operation, setting up for a day or two before moving forward again. The advance is steady now, the German resistance increasingly disorganised, though still sporadically fierce. Towns and villages fall, some abandoned, others defended fanatically. The terrain changes from the flatlands near the Rhine to rolling hills, forests, small mountains. Each new location presents different challenges for setting up the field kitchen, different local resources to potentially utilise. Food supplies become erratic as the supply lines stretch and German resistance targets the routes. You become expert at foraging, finding abandoned farms, requisitioning from German civilians, always with receipts for future reimbursement as per regulations, utilising wild plants when necessary. "Never thought I'd be cooking dandelion greens and nettles," Miller comments, as you prepare a soup using these foraged ingredients to supplement the dwindling meat ration. "My mother would be horrified." "Your mother never had to feed an army on the move with no supply convoy for 3 days, Jenkins replies. "You use what you've got." What you've got becomes increasingly creative. German potato sellers yield their treasures. Abandoned chickens provide eggs and occasionally meat. Wild mushrooms carefully identified using a manual Jenkins Carisad flavour to otherwise bland dishes. Even German military rations captured in quantity during the advance are repurposed and improved upon. In mid-April, your unit pauses outside a small German town that has offered token resistance before surrendering. The spring weather has turned surprisingly warm, a welcome change after the brutal winter. As you set up the kitchen in a meadow blooming with early flowers, news arrives that transforms everything. President Roosevelt has died. The information ripples through the camp, creating a strange, subdued atmosphere. For many of the men, Roosevelt has been the only president they've ever known. His voice on the radio, his leadership through depression and war, has been a constant in their lives. "We'll need to do something," the sergeant says quietly. "Something to mark it, to let the men mourn." That night, you prepare a special meal, not a feast like Christmas, but something carefully crafted to provide comfort. A simple beef stew, rich with vegetables, fresh bread, the yeast given extra time to rise, creating a perfect texture. And for dessert, a bread pudding similar to the one from Christmas, this time flavoured with foraged berries that stain it a deep purple. The men eat in unusual silence, processing their grief. Many speak of home, of what Roosevelt meant to their families during the Depression. Some worry about the war. Will this change things? Will the new President Truman have the same resolve? "Nothing changes for us," the sergeant tells the kitchen crew as you clean up after the meal. "We keep doing our job, one meal at a time." One meal at a time. The mantra that has carried you through the worst of the war continues to guide you through these final, uncertain days. 2 weeks later, cooking breakfast on a misty German morning, you hear a sound that stops everyone in their tracks, cheering. Not isolated shouts, but a wave of human voices expressing pure joy, rolling through the camp from east to west. A jeep roars up to the field kitchen, a lieutenant standing in the passenger seat, his face alight with excitement. "It's over," he shouts. "Hitler's dead, Berlin has fallen, the Germans are surrendering." For a moment, no one moves. The news is too massive, too long-awaited to immediately process. Then Jenkins drops a pot, the clatter breaking the spell, and the kitchen crew erupts in celebration. Embracing, shouting, some weeping openly. The sergeant, always proper, always in control, actually picks up Parker and spins him around before setting him down, both men laughing like children. "Is it really over?" Miller asks, his voice small, almost afraid to believe it. "The fighting here is," the lieutenant confirms. "There might be pockets of resistance, and the war in the Pacific continues, but here, in Europe, it's done." The impact of his words sinks in slowly. Done. After years of danger, deprivation, fear, loss, done. "What do we do now?" you ask the sergeant when the initial celebration subsides. He looks around at the half-prepared breakfast, at the men still celebrating throughout the camp, and makes a decision that surprises everyone. "We cook," he says, "but not breakfast. We prepare a victory feast, the best meal possible with whatever we have. Every man deserves to celebrate this day with a full belly." The victory meal becomes your finest hour as a field cook. With limited supplies but unlimited motivation, you and the kitchen crew create a multi-course celebration that stretches through the day and into evening. The centerpiece is a roasted pig acquired from a local farmer in exchange for coffee and cigarettes, prepared in a pit dug into the ground and lined with stones, covered with earth and allowed to slow cook for hours. The meat, when finally unearthed, falls from the bone, succulent and smoky. Side dishes appear as if by magic: potatoes mashed with garlic, wild greens sautéed with bacon, bread baked fresh in batches throughout the day. For dessert, a cobbler made with canned peaches hoarded for a special occasion, topped with a sweet crumble of crushed cookies and the last of the sugar ration. Men from neighbouring units, hearing of the feast, arrive with their own contributions: liberated wine and schnapps, chocolate from care packages, even ice cream made by an engineering company using ice from a stream and powdered milk mixed with sugar and vanilla extract. The celebration continues into the night, transitioning from meal to party as someone produces an accordion, another a guitar. Songs rise into the spring air, first military songs, then folk songs from home, then finally the gentle nostalgic tunes that speak of love and peace and everything that has been missing from these men's lives. You find yourself sitting slightly apart from the main celebration, exhausted from the day's cooking, but too wired with emotion to sleep. Jenkins joins you, passing over a bottle of something clear and potent. "Not bad hooch for Germans," he comments as you take a cautious sip, the liquid burning a path down your throat. "Think we'll go home soon?" you ask after a comfortable silence. He shrugs. "Some will, others will stay for occupation duty. Either way, we'll still be cooking." "It'll be different though," you say. "Cooking without the fear, without the shortages, without the danger," he adds, his voice softening, "without wondering if each meal might be someone's last." You both contemplate this, watching the celebration continue around the campfires. The men look different already, younger, lighter, as if the end of hostilities has physically transformed them. "We did all right," Jenkins says finally, "for a bunch of guys who mostly became cooks to avoid the infantry. We did more than all right," you correct him. "We kept them fed. We kept them going." You gesture toward the celebrating soldiers. "We're part of why they're still alive to see this day." He nods, accepting this truth. "Never thought food could matter so much." "It's never just food," you reply, echoing Miller's words from months ago. "It's home, it's care, it's humanity." Jenkins raises the bottle in a toast to field cooks, the unsung heroes of this whole damn war. "To survival," you add, clinking your cup against the bottle, "one meal at a time." In the days that follow, the rhythm of military life continues, but with a crucial difference: the absence of fear. No more artillery to dodge while peeling potatoes, no more snipers to worry about while delivering food to forward positions, no more constant vigilance against attack. Orders eventually come. Some units will indeed remain as occupation forces. Others, including yours, will be rotated back to the States, possibly for redeployment to the Pacific, though rumours suggest the Japanese war might also be approaching its end. On your final day, with the field kitchen, the sergeant gathers the crew for an unusual ceremony. From a small box, he produces a set of medals. "These," he explains, "are bronze stars. Not the usual decoration for cooks, I know, but I submitted recommendations with supporting statements from infantry commanders about the impact of our operation on morale and fighting effectiveness. Headquarters approved." One by one, he pins the medals on each member of the kitchen crew. When he reaches you, he actually smiles, a rare, genuine expression that transforms his usually stern face. "For maintaining food service under direct enemy fire," he reads from the citation, "for innovative solutions to critical supply shortages, for extraordinary contribution to unit morale and combat effectiveness, above and beyond the expected duties of a field cook." The weight of the medal on your chest feels strange, unexpected. Cooks don't usually get recognition, let alone decorations. The moment crystallizes everything you've experienced, all the danger, hardship, and unexpected pride of your war service. Later, as you pack your personal gear for the journey home, Miller sits on his cot across from yours, also packing. "What will you do?" he asks. After, when we're really done with all this? You consider the question. Before the war, cooking was just a job, something you did for money. Now it's different. Now you understand food as something powerful, essential, almost sacred in its ability to sustain both body and spirit. Open a restaurant, maybe. You answer, surprising yourself with the certainty of it. Something simple, good food made with care, nothing fancy. I'd eat there, Miller grins, as long as you don't serve powdered eggs or K-rations. Deal, you laugh. No K-rations, ever again. The journey home is long be truck to the coast, by ship across the Atlantic, by train across America. Throughout you continue your duties as a cook, though the circumstances grow increasingly luxurious compared to the frontline conditions you've become accustomed to. On the ship, with a proper galley and abundant supplies, you actually find yourself missing the challenges of field cooking, the creativity required to make palatable meals from limited ingredients, the satisfaction of feeding hungry men who truly appreciate every bite, the bond formed with your crew through shared hardship. When you finally arrive home, stepping off the train in your uniform with campaign ribbons and the unexpected bronze star, your family is waiting. The embraces, the tears, the barrage of questions. It's overwhelming after so long in the structured environment of military life. That night, sitting at your mother's table for a homecoming meal, you find yourself oddly critical of the food, not because it isn't delicious, but because you now see it through different eyes. You notice the abundance, the casual waste, the easy assumption that there will always be more. You appreciate textures and flavours with a heightened awareness born from months of deprivation. What are you thinking about? Your mother asks, noticing your distraction. How can you explain? How can you describe what it means to cook in a war zone? To measure your success not in compliments but in calories delivered, in men sustained through one more day of combat, to create meals from next to nothing while shells explode around you? Just glad to be home, you say instead, reaching for her hand, and grateful for this food. She seems to understand there's more behind your words, but doesn't press. There will be time, perhaps, to share those stories, or perhaps some experiences can never be fully conveyed to those who weren't there. That night, lying in your childhood bed, the softness of the mattress feels almost wrong after so many months of cots, bedrolls, and frozen ground. The silence, no distant artillery, no engines, no men calling out in their sleep is both blessed and eerie. As you drift towards sleep, images from your time as a field cook float through your mind. The massive pot of potatoes on your first day, the sniper fire interrupting breakfast preparation, the frozen pipes in the German winter, the Christmas feast created from nearly nothing, the dangerous crossing of the Rhine, the victory celebration after the surrender. The memories aren't organised by battles or campaigns as they might be for combat soldiers, but by meals, by the triumphant sustenance provided against all odds, by the small victories of keeping men fed so they could win the larger war, one meal at a time. You survived as a field cook in World War II. More than survived, you discovered a calling, a purpose that transcended mere duty. In the crucible of war, in the most challenging cooking environment imaginable, you found what food truly means. Not just sustenance, but comfort, connection, humanity. Sleep comes easily now, in your safe and comfortable bed, so different from the dangerous, uncomfortable conditions you endured. As you sink deeper into peaceful rest, remember that sometimes the most crucial battles aren't fought with weapons, but with the simple, powerful act of feeding those who need it most.